For now, we're going to have a next set of panel discussion, and our topic is going to be capacity planning in the 5G data era. Your panel outline are managing the huge amounts of data generated in the 5G era, aligning capacity planning with 5G digital services plans, the role of satellites in guaranteeing the transfer of data. And your panelist, Mr. Amiri Group Chief Carrier and Wholesale Officer from Etisalat. Mr. Vaneet Mehta, Head of Middle East, Central Asia and Africa Region, Tata Communications. Mr. Henry Yap, Senior Consultant, Cloud and AI, Huawei, Middle East. Mr. Imran Malik, Vice President and Global Sales Fixed Data, SCS. And your moderator is International Consultant on Economic and Policy Issues for Digital Transformation, Dr. Amine Mcharek. So please welcome on the stage our next set of panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel on capacity planning in the 5G data era. Please allow me first to thank Tony and his wonderful team, Tatiana, Christine, and all the others, for planning for this event and putting all this crowd together, as well as welcoming all the distinguished panelists for this session. You know, on the debate for 5G, there is a question that always, comes into the debate. Is 5G an evolution or a revolution? In some aspect, 5G can be considered as just an evolution. Mr. Hatem this morning, he was talking about how the users, when it comes to, let's say, traditional services like watching videos, they're just going to see that the speed is higher, but there is no huge change to what they have experienced with, let's say, previous technology. But definitely when it came to 5G and data, then we can talk about a revolution. Because unlike the previous technologies, 5G is not only about, let's say, managing subscribers. We have a lot of a variety of data that we have to manage. For example, application, sessions, configurations, as well as policy for access to each type of data. And all of this, we have some data on the network, some data on the cloud. So this is not all. We have, when you come to the edge of the network, in 5G, we're going to have millions and millions of devices that are going to be connected with all the data that they generate. But also for these devices, when we talk about low latency services, we will have the application that servers application that should be really close to the edge, and they will be generating data. But also they will need to access data on the subscribers, which is in other place, to enrich the user experience. All of this is creating a lot of complexity in managing data in 5G, but that's not all, because when we talk about management, we don't manage just to manage and to make sure that things work. We need to create value, and we need to monetize data. And all of this become very complex to consolidate data which is on the edge, data on the network, and data on the cloud. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll try to tackle all these questions in our panel today. And as a start, I'm just going to give to all our panelists to bring on their views and their opinions generally on this topic. And then we are going to dive into the questions as it was shared in the outline for this panel. So, Mr. Ali, I'll give you the floor.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very good afternoon to all of you. I know it's quite late, but I see the audience is quite still high. I'm surprised a bit. I think when it comes to new technologies, always from 1G to 2G to 3G to 4G, every system has its own concern. If people remember, during the first era of mobile, people were concerned whether to have a mobile or not to have a mobile. Then when it was 2G and SMS, people were worried about having the right signal or not having the right signal. There was the 3G at least people were started with smartphones, and that was the time where people actually excited about how to use this high-speed data, and then the operators had to learn a lot from there as well. So people faced with more sort of expensive packages and all that. And then when it came to 4G, then people were sort of rest assured that 4G is really going to give something of high speed, but not all the time it was as per the promise. Now, when you were asking that whether 5G is an evolution or revolution, I can't contradict myself. I had said it before, it is a revolution. The one simple reason for 5G is that one thing is guaranteed, that for the users, it will be at least, if today, Etisalat, we announced this morning maybe that 3.1G download. But 1G is said commonly, right? Now, if we go whole world maybe, one thing is assured, that a couple of 100 mega is guaranteed. What does it mean? That means it is high-speed data. So that really makes it much more different. That's where we go into how you manage, and that management becomes from consumer, from enterprise, from the wholesalers, from the IT guys, how to manage this, learning from what they have already experienced in the era of 4G, which is high speed as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. So, Mr. Vaneet, would like to take some...
Yes, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. So I'm a bit of an odd man out because I represent satellites. So I would like to take this opportunity to share with you the views, not just my views, but views from the satellite industry and how satellite industry is going to be relevant in the 5G era. So just building on what Mr. Ali Amiri said, so looking back, when we evolved from analog to 1G, the need was to optimize the utilization of resources, and the killer app was voice. Then people were surprised that SMS creates so much volume, and there was a potential revenue impact as well. So GPRS and Edge was added, and then we went from 2G to 3G, but the main driver again was data. And if you recall, for 2G to 3G, it was envisioned that we'll be perhaps going maximum 2 megabits or higher, and then eventually we were able to do approximately 40 megabits. And then from 3G to 4G, again, the same idea prevailed. But the common thread over here is requirement or the desire to preserve the infrastructure, just to preserve the investments that had been made, and just to optimize what's already there. However, 5G, in my opinion, is taking a totally different view. The standards that are evolving, I mean, this is a holistic view, and if you look at the network, I mean, it is a network of networks, so different resources are going to be added. It's wireline, satellites as well. And one of the things that I just wanted to point out was satellites are considered to be the last resort choice. And it's considered to be old technology, but there's lots of innovation that has happened in satellites, like the terrestrial networks. Now, Mr. Amiri was asking me, would we be able to backhaul the kind of data that would be needed for 5G at the edge? The answer is yes, because now the newer satellites that are evolving with ultra high throughput and software-defined payload, we should be able to cater for connecting the 5G at the edge to the core.
Thank you so much. Last for, let's say, suppliers, or for solution as well as equipment suppliers, Mr. Imran, Mr. Henry, how do you view like this, let's say, difference in managing data when it comes to 5G?
Yeah, so to answer your point, Dr. Amine, as Mr. Amiri also mentioned that, is it a evolution or a revolution. So I guess if we, every technology, I would say the victim has been the mobile operator, because they are the ones who are investing and in the capex to deploy those services to serve their country primarily, right? However, if the 5G is only seen as, you know, adding bandwidth to the end consumer, you know, his download speed was 21 megabits, and now it is 50 megabits. So that's, if that is the only thing which is going to get achieved, then definitely it's just an evolution. However, if the application, along with an ecosystem built with the OEMs and the system integrators and the service providers like us, if it is stitched together with the likes of the mobile operators, and you focus more on the sensors, the end applications, how they are catered to, as you rightly mentioned, even cloud comes into picture. So it's a very hybrid and a complex model. How do you deliver it in a secure manner, in a fast manner, is where the revolution will come from, right? So unless the mobile operator is geared up in this ecosystem, along with the OEMs, along with the service providers like us on the wholesale side, or even the cloud service providers, this revolution cannot be achieved, right? So, and they will still struggle to monetize it, as they've been saying that, you know, 2G to 3G was a struggle to monetize their investments, and so on and so forth. 5G requires a huge amount of investment capex from the mobile operators. Unless this revolution comes in the mindset, I guess, again, it's just going to be the bandwidth going from X to Y for a consumer, which is not essentially the case for 5G, in my view.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Henry.
you. Yes. I'm different point of view from the data capacity plan, because I point of view for implementation. Because we talk about the evolution or revolution. From my point of view, this is revolution big step. Then not only for data part change in 5G, also in data center, the management, security always change, because we want a cloud. From point of view in the data part, you need to big change. You need how to management. And also for layer, we call the multi-layer for your button, many machine type for different, you need to many machine, for example, you need fast array, object store, blah, 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 many different type, but how to do integration and management. Sometimes we talk about the management. So we have some work, very simple work, talk about the transformation from 4G to 5G. We call path to CIO. What is path? We focus in performance. A, availability. S, scalability. The last one, S, is security. This is general. But for CIO, for the 5G, we call CIO, the first one is conversion. Then let your bottom side can be integration in the same resource pool. But have different data domain. One is for data part production. One is for data analysis. For example, big data or something, you can do that. A second one, intelligent. I is intelligent. Just how to do something legacy with 4th generation 4G. You need to manual. You need the people 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to get the plan. Okay, I need not enough something. I need to buy it in per case in processor. But we need the intelligent, and also we need the dynamic config, because we under conversion we have the utilization can be shared. The data can move between. We have another term called the data mobility. How to move the data based on the life cycle to move in different story. The C, I, and O. The O's last O is mean open. They should be supported in multiple. This is very hard to do. But right now we have always in Huawei or something, we need to find out the right solution or co-work with different vendors to do, because they need the generation, very big step. So we need to co-work with different partner or different customer requirement to find what is the solution can be work out. So Huawei stands still can do the development for manager system to a top of data story. But this is about a story for 5G. There is another story we can discuss for virtualization, something, OpenStack, something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Henry. And now we're going to try to dive in the first subtopic on managing the huge amounts of data generated in the 5G era. And my first question will go to telco operators, especially Etisalat, that our understanding that you are deploying a 5G network. So what was your experience, and what were the tools also to forecast like this huge amount of data, and how different was it from 4G?
See, I think the question is quite big, how to manage the data created from the 5G. Now, data 5G, we talk device. Now the device, even the user, have to manage it. And when it comes to the operator, from the time we plan our network, we have to manage it. Because this is totally different than what, as I said, because now we are talking about the speeds of 1 giga or at least multiple 100 mega. So that means that the high capacity coming, not just yes or no, you know? So to just make it an example and very simple maybe, guess if one operator just starts 5G from scratch without having any experience from 4G. When I say experience, everyone, from the CCO to CIO to CTO, everybody's experience. To the contracts, how do you make these contracts? Where do you stand? What the future stands for you in terms of management. So now, personally being the head of wholesale, that's another area, because those who are normally heading the wholesale, they are like managing the highways for connectivity, international connectivity, and then all these 5G which enables applications. Such applications will definitely need to be, again, closer to you, because if it is, you have to transport all the data far away, you run into difficulties again. So there are so many levels of management at different areas. Now, I don't want to take the whole time, one at a time, maybe we can, I'll say, but so far, as I said, at different levels, we have different ways to manage. And when it comes to the contracts, even your contracts needs to be managed properly, taking into consideration the surge. One of the areas, like I tell you very simple, today even we are facing with even roaming. Data used by the roamers today even has increased so much that you have to manage. This is with the current 4G. How do you do that with 5G? What does it mean in terms of providing all the 5G network to your customers if you do not manage it in terms of your packages? If you offer the same package, same as 4G, 3G, and then that will end up your network to be quite expensive. So there should be a premium cost, whether, from what I understood now, that worldwide 20% extra customers agreeing to it. So maybe that could be something to start with.
Thank you very much. I'll go back again to Mr. Imran and then Mr. Amiri and ask what is your approach, especially when it comes to special services, to special segment of industry or specific industry. What is your approach to work with the telco operators to understand exactly what is their need and what is the most effective way to manage the data when it comes to delivering these services?
So in terms of the problem statement, I mean, there is the data generation part, there is the data storage part, there is the data transport part, and obviously then everything has to be put together, as Mr. Amiri pointed out, in terms of packages. And at the end of the day, we have to be able to convert this into hard cash, monetize it. So my takeaway from this morning is that 5G, the use cases are still in infancy, and most importantly, 5G is a journey, not a destination, and it requires the entire society to change. It has the role of a catalyst to change the society in general. So in the whole infrastructure or the ecosystem, our role as a satellite operator is dealing with the transport of data from point A to point B, and hence extending the 5G network or the 4G network to the edge. The easiest thing to do is deploy 5G in cities, and if you look at all of the networks that have rolled out, the 50-odd networks, they are primarily in dense urban areas. But in order for the 5G network to go to the edge, that's where satellites can play a role. So one of the myths about satellites is, and I just want to take this opportunity to address this, is that the bandwidth is very limited. Okay. However, with the evolution in satellites that has taken place, especially in the last 10 years, there has been about $20.5 billion invested, and about 600 companies that have come up in the private sector that have really contributed to innovation in satellites. The amount of bandwidth that you can move from point A to point B from satellites has increased tremendously. The latency has decreased as well because there are multiple orbit satellites. We in SES, we do the traditional geostationary satellites plus the medium Earth orbit satellites, which is 1/4 the latency, and now there are low Earth orbit satellites available as well. We will not be able to move the amount of data that Tata moves because of the physics, but we still have the ability, and with the new software-defined satellites that are coming up and the new constellation of medium Earth orbit satellites that are coming up, we can fast-track the rollout of 5G networks and especially bring in the communities which are beyond the urban city centers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'll add to what Mr. Imran and Mr. Amiri has said. So basically, I agree that this is 5G is a journey for sure. But as you rightly mentioned, that the readiness for that from an infrastructure perspective has to come in now. In terms of whether you have to upgrade the satellites, make them more agile, make them more available for the 5G rollout to be easier, and so on and so forth. From a mobile operator perspective as well, if the infrastructure has to be put in terms of the BTS towers, etc., to be scaled up to handle 5G, I think that has to happen now, which means the dollars go out of the pocket from the mobile operators and the satellite providers. And even for us as Tata Communications, even though we are on the wholesale side of things, the readiness has to be there in terms of. So taking a step ahead on the capacity planning side from a 5G perspective, it has to happen in multiple layers, right? So wholesale is just one plain vanilla layer where if you need 100 gig today, you may need 400 gig tomorrow. That's about it. The complexity comes in when the mobile operators come into picture, because they have to roll out, as Mr. Imran said, into the far-fetched areas as well. So that rollout is an issue for sure. Then how do you wrap around the security bit around the applications and the sensors and to make it a revolution again, going back to the same argument. And that definitely requires an ecosystem to work together, which also includes Huawei from that perspective, because they will be the guys who will be driving the entire orchestration behind this, the 5G rollout, and how do we handle that from a planning perspective.
Thank you.
Okay, I think the very great question talk about the huge data, how to manage. I think it's very big revolution because the difference between the 4G after the 5G or some wireless satellite revolution, they get the big data. The huge data will come here. From our point of view, we see the two things about for the data. Before that, we talk about data we call 4G, we call the life cycle manager. We can depend the hot data, warm data, cold data, physical data, put in a different location. But sometimes we go back to think about the data in 5G. We talk about what the SLA requirement. Because sometimes they're not pitched maybe 10 years ago, but always still hit rate very high. So they need a high I/O, they need low latency, something. So for my concept, we design from the called SLA level. We talk with the customer, say assessment, what is the SLA requirement, dependent data put. For example, the building system survey, length is 1 millisecond, for example, for 5.9 or 6.9, depend on what kind of requirement. Also for entertainment, for movie, maybe you can get the high availability, maybe 4.9 or 2.9, because you can accept them, see something recover them. So I think the first one we talk SLA. The change different before we have the hot data, warm data, we go to the SLA by SS. And very important, how to do the dynamic move between the SLA. This is very important. Right now we put in all in the level 1, level 2, level, but not easy to moving. The moving is very hard to do. We talk about how to do called data mobility, or data mobile. But right now I check in the software is not too much that we need to find out the right platform to do. The second, we talk about the top of the search engine because you have many data. Right now, the legacy we talk about the backup, restore, archiving, but right now I think it break because all the data is over there. It's only spin to different domain. One is called production domain for building system, entertainment. But another you need to call analyzer. For example, you need the big data. You need to do the business certify or something. So I think for data domain, spin to different parts. But in the same pool, you should be support to application can be do. This is my point of view for huge data. And then very important, we call the automatic. We have big resource pool. We can dynamic based on intelligence, based on the application request to assign the required capacity. But they very need the time to plan design the original site. Different between 5 years ago, you need to every 3 months to review many open. Okay, we have utilization 90%, 80%. Not enough. I need to follow that. I need the per case extended. But right now for 5G, time to market should be automatic or orchestrated.
Yes.
They're very important to how to, and also dynamic resource. And also we talk about the config, also how to do the change the config. There are also many discussed items. I think we had very big topic, but based generally we had dynamic, orchestrator, automatic. Can we do this one? Okay.
No, I agree. I mean, the automation bit which Henry talked about, I guess, is very important from because as he mentioned rightly, time to market is going to be important because this is not going to be only a consumer service, right? That you offer a bundle today and it can be rolled out after a week or a month or that's not how it's going to work. So because that is again going to take you back to the evolution phase, not the revolution phase, right? So automation definitely important. I'll go back to Mr. Amiri's point as well, where he mentioned that if there is an investment going on into this kind of a journey, it definitely demands a premium, as he rightly said. So we've already seen, and the operators who want to jump the gun, like go from 2G to a 4G directly or a 3G to a 5G directly, may not be in the right direction to roll it out as effectively as an Etisalat would be who has lived that journey, number one. The second is demanding premium. The answer could be yes and no. We have seen it in India recently, where the rates have been revised on an upward of 40% as well recently because of the next generation of services which have been rolled out. And it has been done by all the operators together. It's not that one operator is doing it. There could be a counter argument to it is that we were anyways very low and non-sustainable, so we have come up to a sustainable level now. But there is definitely the movement in that direction which Mr. Amiri mentioned. And definitely if there is there is going to be a lot of value add which will come from the operators. I would traditionally call them just a reseller of a mobile phone. An iPhone is launched, Etisalats and Do's banners are on Sheikh Zayed Road. They essentially, I see them reselling the hardware, nothing beyond that. But in 5G, it will be much more than this. It has to be an operator's play. It will be an operator's play.
Thank you very much. And the last two questions combined. And I think we all agree that 5G is in early stage and we have very few use cases. But from your experience of the few use cases, how different it is from a use case to another, especially when we're talking about, let's say, special services for special industry or group of users, how different it is at the level of, say, data generation, data storage, and data transport from one use case to another. And do you think in the future we will arrive to standardize, let's say, a common approach on how to address data management at all the levels for, let's say, similar services or similar use cases for specific industries?
Just maybe a point I just wanted to make, and that's from even from last couple of conferences that I've seen, that in fact there's a major issue when it comes to proper use of AR or VR and driverless cars and all, that when it becomes to the full swing, still you may have a major problem in terms of computing thing, leave alone the data storages and all that. So the computing itself is somehow a challenge, and I think you can imagine that. Now, what we are reading that maybe by end of this year you'll be having something like 26 operators. In 2025, you are talking about 2.6 billion customers. So that means the takeoff is going to be huge, but that computing thing, which is at least a couple of questions that I asked personally, it's still at the very infinity. I mean, so that is a part which I think operators have to be part of their contracts with the major suppliers and vendors. That how that could happen, unless it could be that like today we announced, for example, something of 3.1 giga download, but then that could be at a level where when you want to do it, actually practice it, when you want to do those services to become more and more global, I think that could be a challenge to start with.
Thank you so much.
So I just wanted to address in terms of the application, satellites do have some limitations, especially when it comes to latency, in spite of the fact that the low Earth orbit satellites will have a latency less than 45 milliseconds, but still we would not be able to address some of the most critical use cases in 5G. But where satellites do make a difference, I think this morning there was a case presented on mining, and in terms of mobility is where satellites have an absolute right to win. And I have a couple of projects in Brazil at the moment which involve IoT for agriculture. So these are very, very large coffee plantations that are now going towards more efficient way of production using IoT. The data is transported through satellites, which can be done more effectively in the 5G environment. So from the satellite perspective, the thing to note is, or thing to remember, the takeaway from this discussion would be that we are not conducive for all use cases in 5G. However, we do have the throughput to enable some of the use cases, especially in the industrial environment and the fixed data environment, and also enable the rollout of networks towards the edges. And the most important thing to remember would be that satellites have evolved. They're not just the old satellites where you just have the coverage of 1/3 of the world, but in terms of the coverage and throughput, because of the software-driven payload, we have the ability to address 5G requirements.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so from the storage and the overall rollout of the 5G, I would say this would depend on the local regulations as well, which again, going back to the same argument that maybe the Etisalats of the world are the best fit to make sure how smooth and in what manner that rollout can happen, right? So for example, Microsoft has now a cloud in the UAE, and so from perspectives of regulation and from perspectives of catering to the region, because UAE is considered as a neutral destination from a lot of perspectives. So the storage, the application, the sensors, what kind of applications are allowed, not allowed, how much storage can be within the country, which can be on the cloud, etc., is again regulatory wise, it has to be taken care of. And obviously, take a step back, the capacity planning also has to happen in the same fashion. And the leader again would be the likes of the local service providers, the licensed service providers in each country who have to drive it in their way. The other bit which we touched upon is, which Mr. Amiri rightly pointed out, was on the roaming front, right? So 3G roaming itself was a nightmare when people were trying to do it, and then 4G came into picture. So, and now it will be 5G, which obviously does not even involve human roaming, it also involves machines probably, right? Because we are talking about connected cars, we are talking about sensors, we are talking about XYZ. So if that entire ecosystem, which is with a particular consumer, is roaming into Saudi Arabia from UAE, he is carrying that along with him, and the roaming scenarios will be multifold in this case, right? And they have to be tested and to be enabled or disabled, that this works here, this doesn't work here. So it is going to be a complex stuff. It is just the tip of an iceberg how it has started. It has just started by saying that Etisalat and Do have launched 5G. Etisalat was the first to do it in the region. The capacity which you can handle on your mobile has gone up. That's the only thing we know about 5G today. The actual use cases on the ground are yet to be rolled out, right? Which would be interesting days going ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. I have different angle to see the professional service or the serving for the data. I think back of the see the data, we now talk about data, but we not talk about application. We not talk about the infrastructure for server network because the big change. Original the 4G before we have the horizontal implementation, but now 5G, I believe they changed to vertical.
Yes.
So how to call vertical? You need to think about the data, how to call different data center, because the original data, one data copy may be in one data center, but now future may be distribution in different data center. So in the recommendation, we go to do some assessment and go back to see, some assessment, what application to change, because application have also can be from legacy application, change the cloud virtualization, but the different architecture, they will impact the data platform. So should be do some assessment, what in application, maybe 2 years we have, like cycle management, we have upgraded. So that step by step, we can do the next step. This is my point of view for assessment, and find out the professional expert can be held to do the assessment, and also should be automatic. Define the KPI, make your system automatic can be running. This is more easy, not too manual. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. I've been told that time is up. I've been reminded many times that to try to keep the time for this session. So we're going to take only one question from the floor, and it's not going to be Tony. Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the fruitful discussion. I have a question to two parts. One regarding the wholesale from the submarine cable and one for the satellite communication. Now, from now to next 5 years as a short term and the next 10 years, what do you think about the capacity of submarine cables that today we have in the region that can cope the requirement of the huge data transactions going to be across the board between the countries? So the capacity with the current submarine cables that we have from now to next 5 years, it can cope with it, and then the quality of service, because if you don't have really good quality service in submarine, then it's going to affect that area. The second part is the satellite communication. That's again the same story here. That's the required bandwidth and the latency for the current satellite, as you mentioned, and for the future satellite. Because today we talk within the country, the backhauling, which provide through the fiber, the 5G services and whatever. But across the countries, we need to have both the satellite and the submarine cable, which really we need to look to it from now to the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can handle the submarine cable part with Mr. Amiri's permission. So obviously, from the submarine cable part, there are two aspects of it. One is the end of life of every cable. There is an end of life, 15, 20, 25, depending on, and then the terminal equipment, which is there, right? So we started historically with a 10 gig kind of a terminal equipment. So a submarine cable is a 10G enabled system, upgraded to 40 gig, now 100 gig, and 400 gig is also being tested. So based on these two parameters, which all cables are going end of life, or the terminal equipment, how fast they are evolving to handle more speeds between a point and the point, will decide how many more cables do you need in the region, right? So I guess Mr. Amiri can add to this, because
I think, thank you for, it's a right question that it has to go to every wholesaler and management of telecom in general, I mean. Strictly speaking, this comes as part of how you manage. when I said that you today with what you do with your submarine cables, that you're carrying your capacities all the way to Europe or to America, US, or to Asia or wherever. Now, as we were talking a while ago, with regard to how you manage that, you have to have these applications closer to you. So that means, to start with, there should be much more of a rearrangement. So localization of data is going to happen. It has happened already. We at Etisalat today, for example, our localization exceeds 70%. So that means that in the past, all those 70% used to go out. Today, it is N. But then, all the big players, we know big players sometimes means cloud players like Microsoft or Amazon or whoever, they are actually showing the need for high capacity as well. That's why they have also entered into this business. And today, almost everyone knows that they have already cables. And if some of them are around here, they can talk about their plans as well. So this is it. This all comes along this vision that there is need for capacities. And as you rightly mentioned, without affecting the quality. So if you have got 2 teras of IP going towards east and west, and if you can, with 5 cables, for example, 3 of them out, if you can manage with 2, that will definitely impact the quality. So it has to be managed properly. But again, thanks to the technology, if there is no faults, we have got something that the technology today, wavelengths gone from lambda of 10 giga to 40 giga to 100 giga, and now talking about more. And similarly, submarine cables, we were talking about 3 pair, 6 pair, 10 pair, 16 pair. This has been talked about. So all this as a result of this huge need for data. But at the end, your question is right. This is part of what actually how you best manage. Maybe there are a lot of people who manage this, but those who are in the front with the customer, with their enterprise at all, they may not feel the plan of planning it. We feel the plan of that.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right, I can address the satellite part. So traditionally, the design life of a satellite is about 15 years. It takes about 3 to 4 years to build one and launch it. So the design always is behind the times. However, now with the concept of software-defined payload, we would be, for the first time in history, be in step with the requirements. Okay, so that will enable us to, number one, map the coverage with respect to the demand, and number two, we would be able to define the coverage and change the throughput as per the customer's demand. Okay. And by using the higher order modulation schemes, we should be able to provide more throughput. So just to give you an example, just a couple of years back, you would struggle just to put one STM1 over satellite using multiple transponders, but now you can easily do 2 gig in one of our medium Earth orbit transponders, and you can stack them up. So I'm providing about 6 gig, which is very small as compared to what you guys are used to. But for satellites, these numbers are huge. So the other thing that you touched upon was about latency. So in terms of future planning, the number of satellites that you can launch, especially in the geostationary orbit, is dependent upon your orbital slot, and that's a very regulated regime. It involves ITU, as you very well know, and it takes a long time. But the constellations in the medium Earth orbit and the low Earth orbit do not have any such restrictions. So you can add as many satellites as you like, as many satellites as the business case justifies. So the and these particular satellites in the medium Earth orbit and the low Earth orbit do not take as long as 3 years to build. I think OneWeb is now going to be producing hundreds of satellites per year. So hopefully that gives you an idea that satellites are no longer older technology, but they have now pretty much come in step with the rest of the infrastructure.
Thank you very much, everyone. Just before closing this panel, just in the preparation of this panel, I think when we talk about regulation, it definitely affect the way how we manage. And we intentionally try to keep regulation out because it's going to add another layer of complexity, and then we're going to have a panel of 3 or 4 hours. So thank you all, and please join me in thanking all the panelists for their valuable input to this topic. Thank you very much.